Thank you, Yosef. You know, I think sometimes we focus on if we work in the government space or we work in industry, we sometimes forget that law enforcement works very hard day in and day out. The laws that we have in all of our countries are not always the most efficient and the most up-to-date when it comes to dealing with the problems that we have to deal with in the security space on an ongoing basis. And it's always good to just express to law enforcement our appreciation, how grateful we are for all the work they do, particularly given many of the different legal and legislative obstacles that they encounter on a daily basis. So again, please join me in thanking Yosef for his talk and for his service as well. Our fourth speaker and our final speaker on this afternoon's panel is Dr. Madan Oberoi of the Indian Police Service, which it's not lost on me that the acronym for Indian Police Service is IPS. I think that's kind of cool. He's been with the IPS since 1992. He is a Hubert H. Humphrey Fellow, 2010 to 2011, under Fulbright Scholarship Program in the area of cybersecurity from the University of Washington. He also holds a PhD in the area of cybercrime from the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT, in Delhi. Dr. Oberoi is presently deployed as Director, Cyber Innovation and Outreach, Interpol, with global jurisdiction based in Singapore. In his current role, he also looks after the Interpol Police think tank. Dr. Oberoi has worked as Inspector General of Police, Deputy Inspector General of Police, and as a Superintendent of Police with the Central Bureau of Investigation, or CBI. He has headed CBI's Cybercrime Cell and has worked as the head of the Economic Offenses Branch in CBI, as the head of Anti-Corruption Branch of CBI, and as the head of Technical Forensic and Coordination TFC Zone of CBI, and as head of the International Police Cooperation Unit of CBI. Dr. Oberoi has also served in 2 UN peacekeeping missions. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Oberoi to the stage.
Good afternoon, friends. I'm Madan Oberoi from Interpol, and before starting my presentation, I normally like to clarify the role of Interpol. How many of you know what Interpol does? That's a very good number, but my worry is that most of you would be knowing what Interpol does based out of information coming out from Hollywood. So it is my duty to clarify what we don't do. First of all, we do not have any secret bases around the world. Our agents do not carry any guns. We do not do any car chases. And on top of that, we don't even do investigations. So if we don't do all these things, what do we do? And that's what I'll try to attempt to answer in my presentation. I'll start with giving a very high-level overview of what trends we are seeing in cybercrime. I'll then go to the issue of challenges or the strategic questions which law enforcement agencies are facing with regard to investigation of cybercrimes. And then I'll propose the approach which Interpol is adopting and how we are utilizing that approach, and I'll cover that. Coming to cybercrime trends, what we are broadly looking at is increase in terms of ransomware, cybercrimes involving business email compromise, increased attacks on financial sector, which include large-scale attacks on international bank transfers, DD4BC, that is distributed denial of service attacks for Bitcoins, ATM malwares being deployed, increasing use of darknet, increasing use of cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoins, crime as a service being developed as a business model, and a large-scale shift to mobile platforms. Coming to ransomware, we are seeing it evolving from normal encrypting devices to infrastructures like hospitals being attacked. We are seeing in terms of criminal use of darknet, where some of our earlier speakers yesterday also pointed out, where now we are seeing large-scale illicit trade in guns, weapons, national identity documents like passports, utility bills, national ID cards, use of darknets for trade in drugs. We are also seeing large-scale use of cryptocurrencies by criminals, not only for cybercrime, but also for some of the traditional crimes. We have seen cases of kidnapping for ransom, where ransom has been demanded in bitcoins. We are seeing development of crime as a service model with various sites openly advertising their services on darknet and providing kits for ransomware and other hacking services, including hosting trading place for trading in secret information. We are witnessing new forms of crime which we had not witnessed earlier, like Bitcoin thefts of computational resources for Bitcoin mining, embezzlement by Bitcoin exchanges, marketplace exit scams, extortions, new forms of extortions like sextortions and ransomware, and development of crime as a business model. So how are these changes impacting law enforcement agencies? So when we investigate crimes, there are major questions which are coming to the minds of law enforcement and which are troubling us. I intend to pose these questions to this August gathering in the hope of some solutions which you may be able to give us. The foremost question which we debate, and it has been discussed very widely, is related to ownership of data on the internet. It becomes very significant from law enforcement agencies because it determines also in terms of whom should we ask for investigation-related information and AMLAT-related issues. The second question which we are seeing is in terms of large number of rules, regulations, and legal provisions coming into picture from national governments, but the question of how do we enforce them? And if we can enforce them, what are the best ways, best points for enforcement? A case in point would be cryptocurrencies or bitcoins. Some of the jurisdictions have banned Bitcoin transactions, but the question is how do we enforce these bans? And how do we regulate Bitcoins? Probably the only place point where Bitcoin or cryptocurrency transactions can be regulated is the point of exchange between cryptocurrencies and fiat currencies. So we need to select our points of enforcement. The third question is, who is capable of enforcing laws and regulations? Is it the state or typically the law enforcement agencies, or is it some new actors, notably private sector, who are in the best position to enforce these laws? And if that is the case, how does it impact in terms of investigation of crimes? Then, who has the information and expertise? In law enforcement agencies, we very clearly believe that as far as investigation in cyberspace is concerned, both the information and expertise lie outside the domain of law enforcement, so we have no option but to work with other stakeholders. Third-party policing. This is one of the very debatable issues which is coming up, because if you look at the statistics around the world, the number of crimes which are happening in cyberspace and the number of crimes which are taken up for investigation by law enforcement agencies, there's a wide discrepancy. Not many victims are reporting their crimes to law enforcement agencies, probably because they don't see much value coming out of them in terms of what can law enforcement agencies provide. And in this scenario, we are seeing a lot of third-party agencies coming up who are doing the investigations for these victims, but the question comes is, do they have the mandate to bring consequences on the culprits? If not, how does it help the overall criminal justice system? The next point is a very interesting point, and it is about the trust deficit. And here I like to illustrate a recent event. I was at a conference organized by one of our partners, and where the partner agency was showcasing public-private partnership, how his company was working with Interpol to combat cybercrime. And midway during the host's lecture, he started mentioning about how they do not comply with all the directions of law enforcement agencies, how it is important for them to use discretion in accepting the requests of law enforcement agencies. I have spent around 25 years in police service, and my mind went back around a few decades and to see there was a time when private companies would make a point to illustrate how they are compliant with laws and how they help law enforcement agencies in maintaining security and others. Here now we are seeing a trend where companies feel necessary to distance themselves from the efforts of law enforcement agencies. So the question which came to my mind is, what has happened in between? Clearly the answer is that we as law enforcement agencies and as a state in a more broader sense have lost the trust somewhere. There's a need to fill that trust deficit, and that's what we need to work on. There are different reasons which have been given for this. I won't go into those debatable issues, but the outcome is that there's a trust deficit. Then another issue which comes to my mind is disruption versus prosecution-based approach. These days we hear more about takedowns, how many sites have been taken down, how many botnets have been taken down, and less about how many people have been arrested and charged and taken for prosecution. Probably with the disruption-based approach, we are targeting the infrastructure of criminals rather than the criminals themselves, which is the basis of prosecution-based approach. Clearly, a disruption-based approach is less effective than a prosecution-based approach. However, at many times, it is the only option available to law enforcement in absence of clear attribution. So we need to work on this. Then the issues related to attributions are not only related to technology issues. There's more which has to be done at internet governance bodies like ICANN, and these need to be addressed. In light of these questions, there's a clear need for recalibration of strategy by law enforcement agencies. Interpol advocates multi-stakeholder approach to work with private sector, academia, research bodies, other governmental organizations, and communities at large. And in this sense, we advocate a 4-action pillared approach in terms of providing actionable intelligence to law enforcement agencies for concerted action, building up operational capabilities of law enforcement agencies in terms of skills, infrastructures, and SOPs, providing research and strategy support to law enforcement agencies, and working at a platform for international coordination. In this regard, this is a model which Interpol and World Economic Forum developed at Davos, and how public sector and private sector can be used for developing actionable intelligence. But all these things are good to say, that we should have a multi-jurisdictional and a multi-stakeholder platform. How does it actually work in practice? I'll just illustrate it with few slides of how Interpol is doing this. So we have established a cyber fusion center where there are embedded resources from different law enforcement agencies, academia. We have various companies like Barclays, Kaspersky, Trend Micro, Cyber Defense Institute, and NEC, CCOM, embedding their physical resources in terms of manpower in our Cyber Fusion Center, which work with our teams to jointly identify actionable intelligence for taking up with law enforcement agencies. One example is the SIMDA botnet takedown, which happened last year, where we worked with Trend Micro, Kaspersky, Cyber Defense Institute, and Microsoft. Law enforcement agencies from USA, Russia, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Poland, and Singapore worked together for this takedown. Similarly, if you look at the recent bank heist at Bangladesh, where 81 million USD was stolen, we are working with Bangladesh CID Criminal Investigation Department, FBI, and Cyber Defense Institute. Other actors which are working in this area are FireEye, BAE, Symantec, Swift, Bangladesh Bank, and we are working towards involving all the actors so that we can jointly form a task force to combat this kind of crime. In terms of capacity strengthening, we have various programs. One of the notable achievement which we did was last year development of a simulation-based darknet and cryptocurrencies training, where we developed a in-lab darknet and in-lab cryptocurrency environment, and this was done jointly with Netherlands-based research organization known as TNO, as well as CCOM, a Japanese company. We also, in order to train law enforcement agencies, developed a digital security challenge where a cybercrime scenario was created and teams for different countries participated and competed. This was again developed jointly with NEC and Cyber Defense Institute. Under research and innovation efforts, we have developed forensic tools to trace cryptocurrencies, the transactions, and perform analytics on them. These tools have been developed by Interpol Cyber Research Lab jointly with CCOM. Last year, we made a presentation at Black Hat where we identified a major vulnerability in blockchain. This was again done jointly with Kaspersky. The research happened in Cyber Research Lab of Interpol with resources embedded from Kaspersky. There are different research activities which are happening, and we are doing a large number of research projects in collaboration with Georgetown University, University of Waikato in New Zealand, University of South Australia, IIIT in New Delhi, as well as NEC. So basically what we are saying is that there's a need for all stakeholders to come together to combat cybercrime, and this multi-stakeholder has to be also to be a multi-jurisdictional approach, and that is the way forward in Interpol's view to combat cybercrime. Thank you.